Now, we knew that there was a connection between Trump and Epstein, and that's being examined right now. As you know, the House Democrats have released a slew of files, emails, previously unknown to the public, detailing Trump's connection with Epstein. And the mainstream's talking about that, but sliding beneath the radar, something that ain't being discussed right now, is the revelation that Epstein was sinking his colonizing claws into the continent, y'all. Drop Site News has the story about how Jeffrey Epstein, in collaboration with Israel, was trying to create a surveillance state in the Ivory Coast.
All right. Welcome to This Week in Africa, your weekly live stream where we talk about all things pertaining to the continent of Africa and the stories that are important to you and the progression of the continent. Before we get into today's stories, we're going to talk about Jeffrey Epstein and his connection to the Ivory Coast and the continent of Africa. We're going to talk about Tanzania's protest crackdown, and we're going to talk about Nigeria's kidnapping if there is time. But before we get into those stories, let's first do some introductions. I'll turn it over to the co-host before I introduce myself. You are on mute.
My name is Gloria, and I am on mute. But yeah, very happy to be back alongside the Joe Hotagwa.
And I am Joe Hotagwa, founder and CEO of Authentic African. Our goal is to help people visit, move, and invest on the continent of Africa and educate folks about what's happening on the continent. Today, we had a packed agenda, but due to outside circumstances, we may not be able to get through every story, but we will ensure that you guys get access to the stories in the description for you to check out on your own. So make sure you guys check out the description of this video so that you can check it out. If you find this interesting, you can like, comment, subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and share this with anybody you know who's looking for more information on what's happening on the continent. So as you heard in that quick clip, there aren't a lot of people reporting on Epstein's ties to the Ivory Coast. There's a lot of discussion, especially in the United States, about his connections to the current president. We focus here on things pertaining to Africa. And so because the Epstein files have been recently released, as you know, the House and the Senate have signed the agreement to release everything. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's already on the president's desk to sign. And so we will see what comes out more. But what we've seen so far is this story of Jeffrey Epstein and his connection to Côte d'Ivoire. And it's really deep. The Drop Site News has a long story on this. I'll make sure that it's in the description as a follow-up if you guys want to read it. They did a deep dive into all things pertaining to this individual and all of his ties around the world. But we're going to talk specifically to the Ivory Coast. So with that, I'm going to play the rest of this clip. Now, keep in mind, this is African Diaspora News Network and their quick summary of the story. I do want to maybe give a little bit more insight from the Drop Site News article, just so you kind of have a little bit more of some of the details, of the high-level details, before I play the video. So one, Epstein and the former Israeli defense minister Ehud Barak collaborated a ton on a number of different things. Now, there are all kinds of conspiracies about that. You can read about them on your own and make your own determinations, but we know that is for sure. In that process, they worked to sell surveillance systems to Côte d'Ivoire. There are many reasons why people think that is, right? As you've heard, Burkina Faso specifically has implicated Côte d'Ivoire in spying tactics and also potential coup attempts, right? So that has been their claim. There have been other things that have been claimed about Côte d'Ivoire, but just know that at the very least, we know that Israeli surveillance systems, heavily subsidized by American tax dollars, have been used in Côte d'Ivoire, or at least purchased by Côte d'Ivoire. We know that for sure. The newly leaked emails from the House Oversight Committee documents shown that Epstein acted as an unofficial fixer for Israeli intelligence interest in Africa. So it goes beyond in Côte d'Ivoire, but this is the specific story that they focused on. He facilitated deals, arranged meetings, and maintained relationships with Ivorian elites. Ehud Barak, the then Israeli defense minister, continued negotiations even after leaving office. The former president of Côte d'Ivoire was a part of those conversations. Ivorian authorities, their interior minister at the time and chief of staff were also involved in those conversations. And there were a number of folks in the Israeli intelligence that were involved in these conversations. So there were, many parties involved, Jeffrey Epstein being the broker of these deals. This goes all the way back to 2010. By the way, this was post his original time and sentencing, where he got the illegal deal, the amount of time that he got in Florida by Alex Acosta, who ended up working in Trump's first administration. When Epstein went to jail, he went to jail for a short amount of time and was allowed to leave to go to quote unquote work. So really got a sweetheart deal. When he got out, he continued his influence campaigns. And so if I'm not mistaken, he was out in 2009. So 2010 is when he helped to broker this deal. So he was working on this all the way through to 2014, or at least the deal went all the way through to 2014. It's unclear how long Epstein was involved in these negotiations, but he brokered the deal starting in 2010, and it went until 2014. At least that's what we have in terms of the information that's come out from the House Oversight Committee. So with that, let me jump into this video, and then we will give some commentary on the other side.
You see, Israel's former defense minister, Ehud Barak, had eyes on the Ivory Coast, and he wanted to try a little something. And one of his good buddies was Jeffrey Epstein. And this is what the article in Dropside News reports. Jeffrey Epstein and Ehud Barak were specialists in war profiteering. At the end of his tenure as Israel's defense minister and after his supposed retirement, Barak embraced a role as a salesman of Israeli security services to embattled governments, opening the door for Israeli intelligence leaders to shape the security apparatuses of several African nations, including the country of Côte d'Ivoire.
So I'm going to leave it there because there's a lot of conjecture and additional commentary that's not necessarily specific to the article itself. Again, if you guys want to see that, I think it's in the description of this video, of the video that I just shared there, which is in this description. And I will also share the article to the drop site link as well. With that, Gloria, your thoughts on this story? Your thoughts on this story.
Yeah, and as you rightfully pointed out, this is an underreported story for obvious reasons. But of course, our job here is to dig in and try to put two and two together, and not accusing, but just trying to make sense of these allegations that have been put out. We do know that, as was mentioned in that video, Jeffrey Epstein had a long-standing friendship with Ehud Barak, former Israeli prime minister. He was also the former head of their military intelligence. Epstein was also close to another Israeli intelligence officer who has stated publicly that Epstein worked in intelligence adjacent environments. Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Epstein's partner, is the daughter of Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was a documented Israeli intelligence asset with deep ties in Mossad's technology. It is all alleged that Epstein himself was actually an Israeli agent. But we do see how this places him inside elite networks where intelligence, technology, and private money are overlapping. Decades ago, let's say the late 2000s and the 2010s, saw the rise of Israeli private intelligence and surveillance firms that aggressively sold surveillance tools worldwide, including to African governments. Epstein had well-documented relationships with billionaires, with defense contractors, tech CEOs who moved in these same circles. This man wasn't a technician, wasn't an engineer, but he was, as we know, a broker of introductions. He connected people in elite circles. He had access to both political power and intelligence-linked networks. If he's dealing with nations that are heavily corrupt, of course, African nations would be an easy target. Looking at his social ecosystem, it makes sense to infer that he was adjacent to and supportive of the same networks that facilitated Israeli surveillance expansion to Africa. Now, where does Côte d'Ivoire come in? Because the first thing that came to my head when you shared the story with me was, oh gosh, Côte d'Ivoire again. And it just feels like Côte d'Ivoire is always in the middle of mess like this, you know. But what we do know with Côte d'Ivoire is that for over 20 years, it's had power struggles between ethnic and political blocs. You've had presidents who refuse to leave office. You have rival militias. You have rebel leaders who actually become politicians. You have exile leaders returning. So when a country's politics are not institutional, it becomes vulnerable to foreign manipulation. And we know that Côte d'Ivoire has always had heavy foreign influence and interference. We know that it is actually one of the most externally influenced countries in West Africa. France has treated Côte d'Ivoire, for instance, as its post-colonial property for decades. We've seen US military cooperation increase after 9/11. Israel has had long, quiet security ties with several Francophone West African governments. So putting all this together, it almost makes you go, okay, there could be something here for sure. And when you're talking, and the president Ouattara, who's the president of Côte d'Ivoire right now, we know he's corruption-filled, arrest opposition leaders, bans protests. And how does Epstein fit into all of this? If again, back to what I said earlier, Epstein's circle, Israeli intelligence leaked industrialists, you have tech billionaires, you have shadow brokers. This did push surveillance and cyber tools globally, and Africa definitely is no exception, unfortunately, specifically West Africa, specifically Côte d'Ivoire.
Well put. And so all of that context, I think, helps set the stage for the timeline of events that I want to give to you guys now, to give a little bit more context as to what happened. So really quickly, I did mention that in 2009, Epstein got out of jail. And I said that in 2010, the negotiations started. That's actually, I misspoke. The negotiations didn't actually start until 2012. 2010 is when there was a political crisis in Côte d'Ivoire. There was a disputed election. French and UN forces remove the former president, and Ouattara becomes president, who was just referenced by Gloria. There were some people say the country's security services were fractured, and there was, rebellion fears that were protested, or that were persistent, and people were fearing of them. So 2012, Israel steps in with Epstein's help. So January in 2012, Ouattara meets with Israel's defense minister in Jerusalem. That same day, his son meets with Epstein in New York. In September of 2012, Ouattara's niece meets with Epstein. Epstein meets with Ehud Barak immediately afterwards. October of 2012, Epstein travels to Côte d'Ivoire, Angola, and Senegal. There are no public flight logs, but this is how it's described by this reporting. So 2 weeks after Epstein's Africa trip, Ivorian Interior Minister visits Tel Aviv, discuss intelligence cooperation. So you can see 2012 where these meetings are all happening. Obviously, senior leadership didn't meet directly with Epstein. His son met with Epstein in New York. The senior leadership and president met with leadership and defense ministers in Israel. All right, just so there's where the connections are. 2013, Ehud Barak resigns. His business partner coordinates with a certain group. There are all kinds of meetings happening throughout 2013. There are meetings that were coordinated by Epstein for Ehud Barak at the UN General Assembly with Ouattara's cabinet chief. And so, as you can see, this is how things are intensifying. These meetings continue to happen. 2013 to 2014, the surveillance blueprint is built, right? So full surveillance proposal that was given to Ivory Coast, which included phone tapping, satellite interception, radio monitoring, cyber cafe surveillance, analyst review pipelines. So Epstein continued coordinating more meetings with Ouattara's family throughout the late 2013. In 2014, the deal becomes official. March to April of 2014, Côte d'Ivoire restructures its intelligence services. In April, the UN lifts an arms embargo and diamond export ban, clearing a path for how you can actually do this business together, right? Because obviously, because of the civil unrest, there was a UN ban on, you know, a arms embargo on the country. So in June of 2013, June 13th of 2014, Israeli Foreign Minister at that time signs official defense and internal security agreement with Côte d'Ivoire. Israel business delegation, 50 plus executives arrived to pursue commercial opportunities at that time. So obviously in the aftermath, Ouattara consolidates power, wins controversial fourth term. Some people say the civic freedoms have shrunk. Israeli surveillance tech strengthens state repression is what some people are saying. And opposition and activists accuse the government of building a police state. And then, of course, after that, Epstein and AU Barak continue pursuing other African deals. We'll talk more about those as more comes out, but that is what happened there. A lot of information and insight there. There's some comments. You know, Gabriel Boima says it appeared that Epstein was a key figure in NATO's operation, a specific operation that allegedly linked terrorism and many trafficking around the world. That's alleged. Some people are saying other things about African leaders. I'm going to leave that without putting it on screen. But, you know, look, we will be reporting on this more. There's going to be more because that was just out of a leak. And these were photos taken of emails, etc., that people are just trying to comb through now. So, you know, what I just talked to you about was one company's reporting. They are doing deep dives into this. And, you know, they also do a lot of work to try to get background. These people have been reporting, Dropsite has been reporting a ton on what's been happening in Israel and Gaza. They have really good reporting. I mean, they do their background checks. So if you're interested in in these stories and more, you can definitely go check them out. But I just want to make sure that we mention that this is the early stages of this reporting. This is just one of many stories that we expect to come out. But stay tuned because I can imagine that all the other places that have Israel ties probably had some connection with Epstein at some point in time. That is my speculation. We will confirm if that is correct as time goes on. I'm not speaking about any countries in particular, but you guys can think about some of the countries who did not have anything to say in the last 24 months since everything's been happening in Israel and Palestine. Okay, with that, I think we'll move on to the next story. And there's a couple of stories to talk about here. Really tragic and concerning when it comes to Tanzania. You know, we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks, and, you know, Gloria has been receiving some interesting comments on posts. Yeah. And other people who've reported on some of these things have as well. The president of Tanzania, President Hassan, acknowledges a number of unalivings and ordered a quote-unquote probe. 21 plus activists face treason charges, punishable by unaliving. And there was a prominent TikToker or content creator that was arrested that caused a ton of controversy. I'm going to play a bit from one of these videos to give a little bit of context as to what is happening. And then we will give some commentary on the other side.
We'll now shift focus to Tanzania, where President Samia Suluhu Hassan has finally broken her silence on the loss of lives caused due to violent protests that rocked the country during last month's elections. Here is what she said.
Pamoja na kuwa uchaguzi ulifanyika Despite the fact that elections were held, there were incidences of violence that caused property damage, loss of life, and threatened the security of the country.
This is Hassan's most public admission yet, and it came after weeks of accusations of repression. Hassan won the October election with almost 98% of the vote. Her two main rivals were either jailed or barred from running. An election without opposition led to massive protests in Tanzania. Allegations of election rigging added fuel to the protests. Opposition groups claimed that more than 1,000 people were killed by security forces. The United Nations says the toll is in the hundreds, but the government still hasn't released official figures on the death toll. Now, Hassan has announced a national inquiry into these deadly protests.
All right, we'll leave it there. There's far too much to review, but Gloria, the arrest of the 21 activists facing treason, the unalivings of an untold number of people, finally the breaking of her silence of Hassan. Your thoughts on all of these factors and things happening?
Thank you, Joe. So yeah, I put out a video from our analysis the last time we talked about this about 2 weeks ago. I put out a clip from the video, and you should see the comments. You should see the DMs that I've been getting since I put out that video. I would say Tanzanians largely agree, but there is this, like, it feels like 1% that I call them Hassan's foot soldiers. And they are in the comments working hard. And it's not just on my post. Anybody who speaks against Tanzania's government, you have little foot soldiers coming in the comments and saying unprintable things to you. It's basically a strategy. We can read through all of this. We see it's the way it works in Africa. Unfortunately, there will always be those people among us who will do things like this. But I wasn't even mad at any of them. I actually understood what was going on. And if anything, I really do feel sorry for you, because you cannot choose to be on this side of history when you claim to care so much about your country and you want the best for your country, but you're joining a government to attack the masses. Everything is confirmed. There's no speculation. We have seen the videos. These things are truly happening. There are Tanzanians who even tell you they're even afraid to as much as like a post, or even for fear of being tracked or traced to their homes. So this is exactly what is going on. Hassan breaking her silence, I mean, I guess thank you, but we need justice immediately for those bodies that haven't been found. And another weapon that I find that governments like Hassan's government uses, it's throughout Africa. It's happened in Kenya, Nigeria, anywhere you see protests. That narrative, and I see the foot soldiers using that narrative as well. They're using that narrative of people are destroying properties, people are being a threat to security of the state. This is what happens when there's anarchy. I've said this before. It comes from the top. When there is no anarchy, that you don't expect anarchy at the among the people. And we know for a fact that some of these governments do plant these people who come in to disrupt the peace, who come in to disrupt protests. And I will tell you one thing, December 9 is the anniversary of Tanzania's independence, and the people plan to protest again. Hashtag D9, hashtag December 9. It is their right. They're not doing anything wrong. But I can almost predict that there will be those disruptors. I'm not saying for a fact it's all government planted, but there is a high chance that there will be more disruptors who will come in, and then that will be the excuse that will be used to attack the masses and stop them from protesting. I stand with the people of Tanzania, no matter what happens, including those foot soldiers. I stand with you too. This fight, this raising of our voices is also for you. We stand with the people. Wherever an African group of people are suppressed or oppressed, we're there. I don't care about any government. Don't make any excuse for any government. Once you go against the people, we will speak against you. That's where I stand.
Well put. I don't even have much else to add. I will say that the only thing that I'll add is we haven't gotten a chance to get into this, but there was also a secret body dump that was exposed, or dumping bodies. And there's some content and footage on this. We will have to pick that up next week to review the rest of this story There's also a number of atrocities happening in Nigeria, and I really wish that we could go through some of this because Nicki Minaj spoke on it, which was interesting at the United Nations, and the United Nations had some things to say about Trump's claims, and then some folks from was it Nigeria's defense minister who was on with Piers Morgan, and you know, Gloria has a clip of that up on her page. There's a lot of nuance to this discussion about whether or not a genocide is happening on Christians in Nigeria. What we do know is that there is a mass unaliving of people, and regardless of who the target is, the important thing to know is that should not go undiscussed or underreported as it has been. I think what it's become is a tool for two people to fight against each other, two groups, instead of talking about the loss of life. No, Nicki Minaj is not my source for geopolitics. What I'm saying is that she spoke at the UN, is what I'm saying. No, she's not my source for geopolitics. I was saying that it's interesting that she actually spoke at the UN. No, the issue here is that it's much broader than celebrities speaking on these topics. It's the real issue is that there is misinformation continuously going out. And the question that we have to have is, what's more important? Who's being killed, why they're being killed, or what they're going to do about it, right? And I use the word I'm not supposed to use on YouTube, but what we're going to do about it. And the issue is that nothing has been done to, not enough has been done since the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, where everybody was holding up pieces of paper saying, bring back our girls, right? So anyway, that's a story that we'll have to report on later. We also want to report on other things as well. South Africa's Palestinian mystery, 130 Palestinians mysteriously arrived in Johannesburg, and there was a peace deal that happened in the Congo. Unfortunately, we do have to jump, and I really wish that we could go into these stories. And I know that Gloria had prepared some thoughts on this. So what we will do is we will cover off on as much of this as we can when we return, because next week is a holiday. And so we'll have to figure out the following week what we can cover. Much of this will have further reporting. So we'll give you the fallout politically on what's happening in Nigeria. We'll give you any updates on what's been happening in Tanzania, the Congo peace deal that has been completed. And then we will give you more of an update on what happened with these Epstein emails. Gloria, any final thoughts before we go? I know this was a very short and abrupt live stream, but do you have any thoughts before we go?
Oh, no, I think you've covered it all. Thank you so much, Joe.
Yes, and I appreciate you being flexible today. It's been a crazy one. And sorry, guys, for the late start and the early drop-off. Life happens outside of these live streams. We'll leave it at that. So with that, I want to thank you guys all for joining. If you found this interesting, hit that thumbs up. If you know anybody who's interested in learning more about what's happening on the continent, make sure you share this with them through WhatsApp, through Instagram, through Facebook, through wherever means you can. And also, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to both channels at The Gloria AL. Follow her across all platforms and subscribe to @Authentic African on YouTube, @Authentic_African on Instagram, and all the other platforms that we're on. So with that, thanks for watching. See you guys all on the next live stream. Bye, guys.